Welcome to the March 25 edition of Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast featuring ECNL President and CEO Christian Lavers and ECNL Vice President and Chief of Staff Doug Bracken. In the last edition of Breaking the Line, Christian and Doug took a deep dive with the ECNL Chief Medical Advisor Dr. Drew Watson about specialization. Great topic, great show. Today, they put the spotlight on individual and private training. And to do that, we bring you Mr. David Copeland-Smith, the founder of Beast Mode Soccer and the original architect of modern one-to-one technical development. Since 2011, he has set the standard for individual soccer development and private coaching throughout the world. He trains locally in Los Angeles and is the private soccer coach who serious players seek when they want measurable results. His philosophy stands on the principles of discipline and personal accountability, not flash or hype, and he is really, really good. You will like this episode, and you will like David. With that, before I turn it over to Christian Lavers to drive the ship on a fascinating conversation, it's time to go around the league on Breaking the Line, a bi-weekly look at all things ECNL. League play is heating up in the ECNL boys, and we wanted to give some shout-outs to teams who have earned every single point possible through at least 10 games. U13, World Class in Pipeline, U14, Alabama FC, U15, Solar Academy, Concord Fire Platinum, and Gretna Elite Academy, U16, Crossfire Academy, and U19, Tennessee SC, and Florida Premier. At the Regional League boys level, Seattle United has qualified all 6 teams for the ECNL Regional League West playoffs, and Playmaker Football Academy is in first place in 4 of their 6 age groups in the West Division of the Mountain Regional League, with just 3 games remaining in the schedule. In the pre-ECNL, Beach FC boys team took home the U11 and U12 gold medal in the Phantom bracket of the pre-ECNL Northern Cal Cup, advancing to April's pre-ECNL Champions Cup in the process. Also, be on the lookout for the announcement of the first 10 ECNL clubs to participate in the 2026 ECNL International Ibra Cup taking place in September 2026. ECNL girls always prides itself on being a pathway to the highest level of soccer, and so far this year, 7 ECNL clubs have had more than 20 players commit to D1 programs. Legends, Slammers, Sting Black, PDA Blue, FC Stars Blue, Solar SC, and St. Louis Scott Gallagher have all done a tremendous job getting their players to the next level. This has been Around the League, and now we turn it over to Christian Lavers.
Thank you very much, Dean. Appreciate that. As always, we start every podcast the same. We're going to have to do a new introduction because I'm tired of saying I appreciate Dean every time we.
He should do like a Chicago Bulls kind of.
Seriously, don't.
Yeah.
I don't know what that song
something
is,
like
but
that
we all
with
know that.
the introductions. Let's leave the weight out. Let's
If
just
he wants to
maybe
raise
like
his
height.
game, yeah. I think some background lasers and some sound. I think Dean is an appropriate challenge for a little stretch goal for Dean Linke coming into this. And with that, it's an appropriate reference of stretch goal. We're going to introduce David Copeland-Smith. David, first time, long time, right?
Yeah, first time being on with you guys. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we appreciate having you. When we were talking last week, and it was always the topic last week was with respect to specialization and injury risk, and actually that discussion was very nuanced with our chief medical advisor talking about how important workload is on that variable, because so many of the studies are oversimplified, as was much of the discussion on social media about that topic. But as we got deeper into the workload topic and the difficulty of tracking that both across multiple sports when kids do that, but then also across all the other stuff that they may do within a sport, we thought it might be a really interesting topic to talk about how we manage and the good, bad, and everything else about individual training versus team training, integration or lack thereof, and your name and obviously your business, Beast Mode Soccer, was right at the top of my head, and we haven't connected in a while, but I said, hey, let me reach out to David, see if he'd be willing to join us on this incredibly high-profile media opportunity. And of course, you jumped to it, and we're happy to have you.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here. Honestly, it's a topic that I love talking about because there's so many misconceptions, right? And honestly, there's so many loose ends that people don't tie together, which is where the problem stems from.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, why don't you start? Just give us a little of your background and how you got into being, I would say, a specialist in that area, right?
So I came to the US in 2003, which seems like a lifetime ago, right? Because it was. I was in Florida, and that was where I was coaching for MLS camps. And that was where I first got approached to do an individual session. And I looked at the guy like he was crazy. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, like do some footwork and stuff. I'm like, oh, no, you just do that in the backyard, mate. What do you need me for? And he was like, well, they don't know what they're doing. So I was like, okay. So I did it. And with that kid, I saw like rapid growth. And he was only like 9 or 10, but I saw like rapid growth, not just technically, but more so confidence-wise on the field. And this was no kind of level, right? This is like local rec/club, right? So not like levels, but that was like the first tipping point where I was like, okay, there's something here. So I was coaching club in Tampa. Back then it was FC Tampa. I think they're HC United now. They may have changed again. Then fast forward a couple of years, I met a girl. That's how most of my stories start. I met a girl.
And by the way.
Yeah. And they've never got a good ending.
Yet.
She wanted to move out of California. So I followed her and I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Because I always thought I'd end up out here. I knew nothing about it, but I was, what do you know apart from Saved by the Bell if you grew up in England, right? That's it. So I was like, I could be Zach Morris. Let's go. So we drove over here from Florida. And my goal when I got here, I was like, right, I don't want to coach club. I want to focus on individuals, but I need to meet players and coaches. And I'm kind of like an introverted extrovert. And
what year was this, by the way, when you moved out to California?
This was 05. And I put my name down on one of those like websites where they need players for teams. Because that's what I love about football, right? It's a real connector, football. You can just, go along, join a pickup game, and you can meet people who you bounce off. So I put my name down on this random site. Luckily, I survived. It wasn't like, a crazy person's website. And we were playing against a team called Hollywood United. And
Hollywood United. I think I know where this story is going. Yep.
Yeah. So, and as we're playing, I recognize a few people. There was a guy from the Cult, the 80s rock band. And I'm like, that is not Billy Duffy. And it was Billy Duffy. And I'm like, oh my God, because my dad used to listen to all that, right? Like, and the guy in goal was on a show called Without a Trace. It was Anthony LaPaglia. And I'm like, what is this? Right?
And you were Zach Morris, right?
I was trying to be Zach Morris. But then their centre back was this really tall black guy called Hilton. And I looked and I'm like, this guy's in a Nike commercial right now. And he's a coach in the Nike commercial. I've got to speak to him afterward. So, I'm going up to the guy afterward. And we're playing against them and they smashed us to bits. And it's one of those moments where you either do or you don't. Right. And it's difficult for me to go up to a group of strangers. So I went up to him. I was like, hello, mate. I recognize you from a Nike commercial. I'm like, you're a coach. He's like, oh, yeah, I do a bit of this, bit of that. And I told him what my goal was. And he was like, listen, I've got a player. They live here. Come out with me and I'll pass him on to you. And with that kid, again, I saw that growth. And then one of the guys who also played for Hollywood United, a guy called Rocco Santangelo, I interviewed for a local high school jobs, because that was my other goal. I was like, I'll get a job at a high school program because that's, you know, only a 3-month commitment, and then I can meet players that I can work with. And Rocco ended up being the goalkeeper coach at this program, so it was like very weird. And I got this JV job at Harvard Westlake, which is like a I want to say it's a bougie school. It's a bougie school in LA. You know, when I went for the interview, I didn't believe it was a high school. I thought this is a college. Like, the facilities and everything were insane.
Well, I think here in the U.S. we call what you guys call college high school is, I think, how it works from the educational perspective.
See, I thought what we call
I'm just going to keep lobbing things at you, waiting for some type of response.
So what we call a GCSE, you call a master's degree. And it's funny. So I'll see where this is going. So one of the kids there, like, I was doing JV. This kid was on varsity. It was Ali Riley, and we clashed the first day because, you know, the whole freshman senior thing, and the head of the program couldn't make it that first day. I think he crashed his car or something. So I was taking both, and we clashed a little bit. But then I would see her watching my sessions, and I thought she was just trying to like mess with me by like making me uncomfortable. But then she came up to me. She's like, "Oh, like, my parents were wondering whether you'd train me. I've got a chance to play for New Zealand under 20s in the World Cup." And I'm like, "Yeah, but obviously we clashed a little bit. So if you agree to do everything I tell you, I'll do it." And I was already excited because I'm like, at the time, this kid was a speedboat with no driver, right? She was rapid. So they would just knock the ball over and she'd sprint on and score. But I also knew, like, she was smart and she would listen. So we set out a program for her, and she did it. She went to that Youth World Cup and made an impact, so much so that John Herdman was the coach of the U20 New Zealand then. John ended up bringing her up to the full team for the next World Cup. And again, she was, I would say, one of the first high-level players that I was a little bit taken back by the amount of technical and psychological development we could do in a short space of time. And I would say like 3 months was when we really saw a shift. And Ali ended up going to Stanford. So obviously she's a smart woman. And then she would come back in the summers, and I would train Kelly O'Hara because they were roommates. Kristen Press would come out, Whitney Engen because she was tight with Kristen. And this was kind of just, I'd say, just before or maybe the year of like ECNL kicking off, right? Because I remember
we kicked off in 2009 was our first year.
So. Yeah, so it was those formative years, right? So because Riley went to Stanford in 2006, so it'd have been those, because I started to get ECNL kids toward the end of Riley's Stanford career. So it kicked off from there, and then they went to WPS. WPS failed, which was a blessing for me because we had all these players coming to LA to train or to just stay in the off season, and they stayed when the league failed. And I had a network of players who respected what I did, so I'd get a bunch of these players come in to train, and then we'd play pickup. So, you know, Abby Wambach, Liz Bogus, Amy Lepellebit, Nikki Washington, like, and obviously we're going back here, so a lot of people might not remember they'll remember Abby, but you know, players like Nikki Washington were formative in the league, in the NWSL, and they were world-class players. You know, Alex, Tobin Heath, like all these players would come out and we would train, and then we would play pickup. So that's where it all kicked off. And then I organized it all into a business because Ali came up to me one of her off seasons, maybe the one between Stanford and WPS. She played for FC Gold Pride with Kelly and Martha. Albertine was the coach then, and she's like, Dave, like, you need to grow up a little bit and start this company because no one knows who you are. Like, you know, when we talk about you, it's like just Dave, the soccer guy. And I was very fortunate at the time where I was house sitting for a pop star in England. He's called Robbie Williams. And he had a house on Mulholland in Beverly Hills. And he had a soccer, like a converted tennis court into a little 7v7 field. And I was house sitting for his dogs because he was on tour. So, you know, I was very, very fortunate that we could train and play there, especially for like players like Alex, who already had like a good size profile then. So it was very private. But Riles was like, Dave, you've got to, you know, grow up a little bit. And I was like laughing. I'm like, bro, I'm Peter Pan. What do you mean? I'm living in a pop star's house on Mulholland Drive with no rent, no bills, and I do soccer for a living. What are you talking about? I've unlocked the code, my friend. But you know, there's a few people that I listen to, and she's one of them. So I started a company, and you know, I really dived into skill acquisition. And my friends always say, like, I gave myself a master's degree in mechanics and skill acquisition, and skill interpretation, because I didn't do anything for months. I just read books. And this is like pre, you know, where you could get everything, all the information easy, right? I remember like going on eBay and buying books for like $300 because they were out of print, but I really needed to read them. And you know, I've got all these books in my storage somewhere, and I really did give myself that master's degree in biomechanics, growth mechanics, how to acquire skill, how to translate it to the field. And I started to organize. And back then, they weren't called IDPs, right? Back then, it was just like, Dave, will you write me a program? And I'm like, yeah, of course I will. And again, it was a nightmare back then. I would, you know, have to pull, for Riley, for example, I'd pull old Gold Pride games off of YouTube. I'd go into iMovie and clip it myself, which would take 3 hours to clip, you know, a 90-minute game. Then I'd study them. Then I'd write out a plan. Then I'd send it to her. And then we would execute. And looking back, yeah, that was the first of my IDPs. And then another big tipping point was Alex. First time we were trading, it's a funny story. Kelly texted me and she's like, oh, can I bring a couple of players up tonight? And because it was Robbie Williams' field, we used to get a lot of Premier League players up in the summer. Because you know that world, sports and entertainment, they often, you know, they want to be friends with each other, right? But Rob would just fob them off onto me and be like, oh, Dave, this, you know, Sean Wright Phillips wants to come up and play. Here's his number. Text him. So I was like, Kel, like, yeah, they can come, but it's a good level tonight. Like, we've got a couple of Prem players come up. And I said, if they're not very good, they're going to be on your team. And Kelly, like, laughed. She's like, yeah, like, I'm confident they'll be fine. I'm like, okay. And it was Alex and Tobin. And I'll be honest, I was excited about Tobin because Tobin is small-sided. Like, come on. So we trained first, we played, and I was right, like Tobin was a demon in that small-sided area. And Alex came up to me afterward and was like, listen, I just wanted to see what you were like as a trainer, see if we bounced off each other. So Mia Hamm is training a bunch of us. This is in 2012. Mia Hamm's training a bunch of us. Like, I'd love it if you came out and did the off days, but Mia wants you to come to her days as well so you can share notes. And Christian, I'm stood there like, what is happening? Like, what is happening? I'm from Plymouth, not a big town in England. I have no connections in soccer. My dad was a boxer and an electrician. My mum was a swimmer and worked in retail. right? So I do come from a coaching background because dad was also a squash coach, mum was a swimming coach. But I have no connections in football. And later on in life, you learn that connections are everything, and I'm still learning that now. But I had nothing, and I'm stood there, and it was that moment. I looked at her, and I'm like, "You're stood on Robbie Williams' field. Alex Morgan's just asked you if you can train a bunch of the national team players alongside Mia Hamm. Like, what is happening here? Like, this is amazing." So I'm like trying to be all, cool. I'm like, yeah, of course, no problem. And I go down to that first session, I'm shitting myself. Not because of the players. I'm confident with the players because I know I'm hyper organized. I know who was going. I'd researched them and I knew what they needed to work on. But Mia, like, come on, it's Mia Hamm, right? Like, Mia's one of the people from that 99 team and before who will always be relevant. Always. And she's made moves that are genius that she doesn't even try and she's relevant, right? And when I tell you she was the kindest person to me, like there was no ego. She was like, "Dave, I just want you to come to my session so that we're on the same page." And Christian, her delivery, that's what struck me the most. Like, bearing in mind, you've got like Boxy, you've got Abby Wambach, you've got Rachel Bueller or Van Hollebeck now, you've got Alex, you've got Sid LaRue, and this is a young Sid LaRue, spicy Sid LaRue, right? And you've got all of these players, and they could be 20 yards away, and Mia talked, and you could hear a pin drop because they're all like, right, we need to listen. And that's something that I learned very, very much from Mia is when you garnish that amount of respect, you don't need to scream at players, especially in my environment, right? Because my environment is very different than coaching. My environment, everybody who comes there knows that my only goal is to get them better. So I learned a lot from Mia, and it was one of those sessions where one of the players came up to me and she's like, "Dave, like, I live in San Diego, so I can't come up to all these sessions. Can you write me a program that I can do at home?" She's like, "I just really need to do footwork." And bearing in mind, like, she won a gold medal, right? Like, this is a legit player. And on the way home, I was like, if a player at this level doesn't know what to do on their own, how does, 14, 15-year-old? So I wrote a program for her, and then, I gave it to her. And she executed, obviously, and saw the results, and she's more confident on the ball. And I started to write out a new program for anyone called the Better Soccer Blueprint. And that was our first digital program, which, again, looking back, it wasn't, because this is one thing I'm adamant about, is when I put out digital programs, it's not a follow along, because football isn't follow along. It's, here's a set of exercises, here's the way you analyze your game, analyze yourself, ask for your coach's input, then pick the drills that match. And that, again, that was our first program, and that was because of that player. And then, unfortunately, like now, you fast forward 15 years, and now there's too much information. Right, so now people go for a drink of information from a tap, and they get hit with a fire hydrant of information. And who do you believe? Right, like you see viral videos of kids jumping through hoops of fire, doing somersaults with $20,000 worth of skills equipment, and every shot goes into a top corner, and kids want to do that because it was viral, and it's like, bro, this is all horseshit.
So let's take that as a stepping off point. I mean, that's a really interesting story, by the way. I didn't know almost any of that.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. Congrats on that. Somewhere in there, your company was Beast Mode Soccer.
Yes.
Obviously, you've trained lots of pros, international players, lots of youth, men, women, boys, girls. And now you very big social presence, but on the various channels. But you're providing if I had to put you in a box, David Copeland-Smith in a box, you are an expert in your own words in individual mechanical, biomechanical actions, technical skill training, right? Much of that being training without opposition, or training an individual in a ball or a few people in a ball. And we don't need to go into the unopposed versus opposed philosophical debate. I think for our purposes, maybe I'll just say we agree that both are important.
We can go into it. The one thing I say is, with all of those arguments, and I always listen because I'm interested, and I'm not going to die on a hill. If you don't believe in unopposed, what do I care if you don't believe in unopposed, right? But one thing they always miss is the psychological aspect of training unopposed, of the repeat actions. For example, Rachel Daly, like Rach always needed me the couple of days before games to give her exercises to do where she could do like 40 or 50 finishes, the exact same finish. Now, did she need that technically? No. But psychologically, she went into games then and she's prepared. And if that action happened in a game, she'd bang it. And that's always my comeback to it. And then I mute the Twitter feed because they just argue amongst themselves.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, it's clear in even just your description of the founding story here in that specific example as well, that you put a lot more thought into this than most people that are in the individual training space. And I think I would say that, team training is really important to have opposition, and too much individual stuff in team training is probably a misallocation of time.
Agreed.
But every good player in the world spends enormous amounts of time with, whether you call it a ball on a wall or one player, one ball, just playing and working on different skills and mechanics. So I think it is absolutely true that you need both. You need the individual work on your own or in small group to refine things, and then you need the collective decision-making, opposition, pressure, whatever. Yeah. And if you're comfortable with that statement, then we can move in.
100%, yeah.
Okay, so what started this, to go back to the beginning, was the recognition that if both of these things are important, and then you also deal with a hyper-competitive youth sports world where everybody's trying to, move forward, move up, all that sort of stuff. We talked about it last week from the perspective of if the individual trainer is not aware of what the team training environment is demanding, or vice versa, there is potentially an increase of risk from overtraining of a player. So I guess I'll start from the perspective of, when you look at, and a lot of these things will probably be questions of good practice, bad practice, or best practices or not, to help people maybe distinguish between what is a good thing to do and not, or maybe good directions to pursue when you're looking for these things. But also, I think, to educate maybe some team coaches in how can you work more collaboratively with people that are providing these things, because kids want them and they are a good thing if done right. So first question I'll ask, maybe for you to elaborate on, when you start to work with a player, how do you try and create individual training programs that are, well, one, tailored to them, and I think you'll probably talk about research and film and some stuff like that, that then also work into the schedule and demands that they already have. And certainly if they're professional, it's going to be only in soccer, but in youth, it could be a kid who's playing soccer and basketball, or soccer and track, or just doing a lot of soccer. How do you answer those two questions and get us some guide rails?
So when we onboard a new player, first thing I ask for is either Huddle or VO or Trace, whatever one that they use, because I want to get that footage. Then we break that down and I send them a questionnaire, basically strengths that they think they've got, weaknesses, their goals, who are their mirror players that they in the professional level, who they want to mirror their game around. Then we ask their schedule. So, if it's ECNL kids, what days are they training, then their game schedule, what games or the days they're playing. Because a lot of the time, parents are the crazy ones where they were like, oh, well, she's got a game at 1, so we could train at 9. And I'm like, you've got to load it properly. So we take all of that into account. What I try to do is have a dialogue with coaches. But what I found, Christian, is egos, man. Egos ruin it. Like, coaches don't want to speak to me. Not all of them. I've got some great relationships. But it's almost like, and this is levels. This runs from youth all the way through to certain national teams, where staff won't speak to me because it's almost like, because then they'd be admitting that I'm doing something that they're not. And I find that the best coaches are absolutely the most open ones, right? So, oh yeah, brilliant. She needs to work on this, this, and this. But the way around that for me is, if they don't respond to my emails, I go through the kid and be like, hey, like, ask the coach what they think you need to work on. Ask them to be brutally honest. Then you give me that information and we work around. And it goes both sides, because a lot of these trainers chase clout, not development, right? And they think they're above the coaches. And you see this on social media posts when they're talking shit about team training and your coach can't do this and your coach can't do that. And I see them and I'm like, first of all, I immediately block or mute that person, because I'm like, they don't know what they're doing. And then you've got the egos on the other side, which I just spoke about. And if we could educate all of us to just put your ego aside. Ego's a good thing if you know how to check it. You know, like, I will speak to anyone coaching wise, and we might clash. We might not like each other. But I'll speak to you anyway and be like, right, we need to, you know, I used to clash with people at US Soccer about Alex and them, but we'd still speak. You know, I know you know all about clashing at US Soccer. And we'd still...
The banter can go both ways, Christian, I think, is what he's saying.
Fair play.
Yeah, well done. Touche.
Yeah, but you do, right? You know, so you know exactly what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
Right? But I'd still speak. Now, they might have hated speaking to me. In fact, I know they did. But would still, through gritted teeth, would still agree on things, right? So I feel like if people put their egos aside, we could both get on the same page, and then it's easier for a trainer to monitor load and a coach to monitor load, and all it takes is a text to like, hey, I've got this player on these days, what's your schedule this week? Right, just to make sure, because a lot of the times it's up to the trainer to educate the player and the parents. Right, like I said, you know, if you've got a tournament in Arizona and you've flown from Southern California and you've got 2 games, I don't want to train you on the Friday, right? Because I feel like that needs to be your rest day, and that's going to be a travel day, so you don't need that overload, right? And if you've got team training on a Thursday, then we're not going to do it either. I'll see you when you come back. So
do you feel like that happened over time? Like, did you need to earn that clout to be able to do that?
Yeah, mate. So I had coaches ban their kids from working with me. And I would call them, and they'd never answer the phone because they're shit houses. But I'd call them and I'd leave a message like, bro, like, what is your problem? Like, you don't know what we... And I think a lot of it was like the name of the company, like Peace Films. Everyone thinks I'm like this drill sergeant. And I couldn't be the more opposite. Right? Like, I've had sessions where the kid's mentally gone. She's gone. And she just needs a break. And we will sit down and chat for an hour. And we'll get footage of the last game and be like, oh, listen, we're not going to work today, but let's have a look. Let's see where you think you're going on. So I feel like it was a lot of, on my side, of having to educate the masses of what we do. And I've fallen into traps before. I've fallen into traps of posting bullshit to try and get viral. Right? I fell into that clout chasing trap. And when I look back, I've got shame. I'll be honest. Some of those drills, I'm like, oh my God, I cringe
Well, we all can do that in our growth curve, right? You hope you can look back and cringe, because if you can't, either you were a savant from day one, which is probably mathematically impossible, or you haven't grown that much. But one of the things, and when I spoke to you last week, we talked about, that I think resonates with what you're saying here, is that if you want to know who a player thinks has helped them become the player they become, you should ask the player.
Yeah.
And not, be aware or be cautious around anybody, whether it's individual coach, team coach, club, who claims, to be the source of development of this player or the cause, right? Because at the end of the day, players develop themselves, right? And they choose resources to help them in that process.
Yes. I mean, an ex-Arsenal coach got in trouble for it last week, right? With Max Dowman. Apparently, a guy went on TalkSport, and Max's dad turned around and said, "This guy didn't do anything." So I don't know why he's claiming it. And that's the thing. If you look at one thing I'm proud of, and if you look back, I don't claim anything. The only thing I claim is that we've helped guide players. Right, because I'm not doing the work. They are. I do my work, but they're on the field doing it. Right, they're at home going out into a yard doing the work. And yes, do I highlight players that I've worked with? Yeah, of course. But if you can find anything saying, "Yeah, this is my player," it's not, because there's so many moving parts, and individual training is a small cog in the wheel, right? And for me, obviously, that wheel is important, but club coaching, strength and conditioning, parents, teammates, everybody plays a role here. And I think you're right. There should always be a warning flag with trainers, especially, who they'll train someone twice and it'll be all over their social. And that is a trend that we've noticed lately, is that, they'll do a couple of, I'm not going to call out the company because I don't want to give them attention, but there's a company in LA who do it. And they basically had a player reach out to players that I work with on a professional team, and we're like, we'll do 3 sessions. And so obviously the players do it, and immediately photographer comes out, videographer, and the player in question called me afterward and was like, "Hey, listen, I just want to let you know, I just did this session. First of all, it was shit. They didn't even know what position I played. Second of all, I just had to call them and tell them they are not to use that footage." And that's what a lot of people are doing. It's a shortcut for clout. Now, do we have clout? Yeah. But we've garnered that with long-term development. With Alex, not once have I ever asked Alex Morgan to post about me. Never. Because the way I've always thought is, well, if you're good enough, people talk anyway. Right? And I worked with Alex for 12 years. Every off-season, every time she was injured and she needed to come back, every time she got cut from the national team, I put a lot into that journey. I put a lot into Rachel's journey. I put a lot emotionally, physically, and mentally into my players. Yet I will never be like, "Yep, they got there because of me," because it's not true.
No, and I think if you look on Doug, and you might have an opinion on this. Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, a fully professionalized club would have, all of this stuff built in. And when you're talking about the biggest clubs in the world, they do, where there's IDPs for the top players, there's individual training built into the team training program, there's the gym down the street, down the path, there's the nutritionist who's telling them exactly what to eat, and it's all packaged. Most youth clubs don't have anything close to that. The coaches don't have the bandwidth to manage all of it. And so if in that world you have coaches who don't make it at least feasible for players to go find the things that they're not going to be able to get from the club. And that's not a criticism. It's just a reality. There's not enough time for every youth club coach to do individual sessions for every kid that they coach. There's just anyone who tells you they can do that is lying. Right. So
yeah, I was gonna ask you, David, like when it works really well from your perspective, what does that look like?
So we'll talk from like a professional standpoint.
I do address, not sorry to interrupt you, but do also address like the youth player, because that's ultimately who we're talking to. But
they're pretty much honestly, they're pretty much the same. Like I'll tell you, one Adamos at Gotham. You know, when I have Gotham players in the off season, one speaks to me, tells me what they want it to work on. Usually it's spot on what I want to work on. If it's not, I'll be like, hey, what about this? And it's not like a long conversation. We're not going out for a beer. It's very short and straight to the point. Laura Harvey is another one. She'll reach out like, Dave, this is what they want. I need them to work on. And I'm not going to argue with a head coach, right? They've got them day in, day out. So I'm going to give them what they want. And if the player wants to add, then I'll run it by the coach. Right? Yeah, okay. And with the youth, I'll take, say, Anton and Jeff at Beach. Do you know those guys? They do the ECNL teams. They are what I would call the best coaches from an attitude standpoint. Because Jeff and Anton will be like, Dave, we'll take one of the players I work with is Emily. Right, she's a beach player. She's a lovely little player. We're actually trying to get her into the Ecuadorian national team because she's like a nice technical player. And she's on Anton's team. And Anton will be like, Dave, brilliant. You're working with Emily. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start next week. Great. This is our IDP that we've written out. If you don't agree with it, let me know. And there's that collaboration that gives me mad respect for him and that club, that they're respecting what I do. Because Anton and Jeff, they get it. They can't, you know, say they've got 2 teams each. They can't write 40 IDPs and update them every week. Because it takes about, you know, an hour to properly update them. That's a full-time job. Right? So they can't do that. So when it works well, that's it. And, you know, Anton will text me after a game going, oh, Em killed it today. She did this, she did that. I'll send you the footage when I'm done. Right? And
I'm going to jump on that because you've said it a few times and I don't want it to go unnoticed because I think it's really important. Because one of my pet peeves when I look at some individual training is how generic it is. Right. And by the way, generic doesn't mean it doesn't look good or look fancy. And in some ways, the more poles, cones, sticks, hurdles, flares, whatever, the more some people think it is. It's really impactful, although you never see those things on a soccer field. But I think one of the big litmus tests in any sort of evaluation of individual training is how specific is it to that player and their needs and strengths and weaknesses at the time versus the guy who's just standing there saying, okay, now juggle 10 times. Now dribble through these cones. Now, you know what I mean? So you've talked a lot about film, IDPs, updating IDPs, all that stuff. I think that's a really important thing to call out for people to discern between good and bad.
For me, a massive flashing red flag is what I call equipment monsters. Right? The ones who take 25 minutes to put all the equipment out and it looks great. It looks amazing on camera. Right? And then you see it and it's just generic crap, but it goes viral because it looks amazing. And one thing in my first session with players, the one thing I always say is like, at any given moment, you can stop and ask why. Why are we doing this? And I will break down exactly the why.
Because if it doesn't transfer, what's the point, right?
What's the point? And the funny thing is like, since we decided to be 100% organic to who we are on social, you know, I'll just throw the drone up in the sky and let it film. Some of these drills must be really boring to watch because people are like, well, That's basic. Right, but say it's a Kennedy Fuller, for example. I do a lot of work with Kennedy, ex-ECNL kid, ex-Solar kid. Phenomenal to work with. Next generation attitude of a 35-year-old veteran. Just wants to get it done. And Ken's, for me, I want her to be more brave. Last 2 seasons, she was a young player. Now she isn't. I want her to pick that ball up and drive at players, beat them and shoot. Right, so that's not a really attractive drill, right? There's no jumping through hoops. There's no, mannequins jumping out of the way. It's literally me playing in, her having an attacking first touch, beating a player and shooting. Yeah, she scored that exact goal last week, right? And again, I'm not saying it's because of what we've done, but I am saying it's because she's confident that she's done that a million times. And apparently, like her mum told me when she was 12, she'd do it all the time, right? And I've seen footage of when she was in ECNL, and that was her. So it was trying to get that out at the pro level. So, I think trainers as a red flag. Christian, I've seen so much, mate. I've seen trainers go out on the field, set it all up, do one drill with a player and leave. And then you see the drill on social and it's like, oh yeah, we did this session today. This is working on this. And I'm like, it wasn't though. It wasn't. You literally had like 3 cameramen out getting all the different angles. You're an influencer. You're not a trainer.
Well,
big difference.
What about this? Because the other thing is, and you touched on mentality to a certain point. There's also limited, especially if you're going to do what you do, I don't want to say at scale, but you're going to train more than one player in your day or in your week. There's got to be some recognition, in my opinion anyway, that what the individual trainer is doing is giving some very specific feedback on mechanics and technique and that sort of thing that is designed to transfer. And you can do that within a session, but I would think then what the player then has to do is go home and then do more of that without the trainer there. 100%. And there's also this, there's a large number of kids who will do these exercises. Let's just assume they're really good exercises tailored for that player's weaknesses, designed correctly. But the only time the kid's going to get a ball out and do it is when the trainer's standing right there over the top of them. So talk about how you look at or how you get the kid to do this outside of the moments when you are there, and then how you reflect that back into sort of a schedule with that kid or an updating of the IDP. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I tend to keep it very simple. Now, we have an app, Beast Mode Soccer Plus, so, most of the exercises I do will be in there, and I'll, if they need a refresher, I'll be like, right, it's there. That's all. I won't give them more than 2 exercises to do. And I want them to repeat it because I feel like one of the traps people fall into more. When we first brought out the app, I was getting text or emails from people going, oh, my daughter's finished all the sessions. What's next? When's the new ones? And I'm like, that one with Alex Morgan. I'm like, we've probably done that 100 times. You need a small amount of exercises that you repeat and you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. And that's what we do with our players. Like, number one, doesn't overload them, right? Doesn't confuse them.
It's like the book 2,000 Drills for Dummies. Everybody forgets the end of the title.
Right? No, it's true, right? And so it's very simple. And then the IDP is literally like, right, these are the exercises you do this week, boom. But more importantly than that, it's, I want you to go to your team practice and I want you to be brave. Right? I want you to trust yourself and do this in a game or in practice at first. And if it doesn't work, and it won't, maybe the first time, second time, third time, I want you to have that bravery and keep doing it and tweak it and fix it. And speak to your coach and tell them, listen, I'm trying this week. This is what I'm trying to get down. And that's the way that it will eventually morph into technique in a game, like the skill part of it, right? So you will see that transition from being able to do it with your friends in a pickup game to then in practice when it matters, then in a game when it really matters. And that's where your coaching comes in, where you coach your players to be brave and to try new things. So for me, like, I feel like my players understand that. And I'll get funny texts. Oh, I tried that tonight. I'm like, oh, what happened? I'm like, absolutely failed. Fell on my ass or something like that. But I've done it in a way that it's like, all right, what did you do? She's like, oh, kept trying it. And that's what I want, because, unfortunately, we live in a world, right, where instant gratification is everywhere. Right? I can order something on Amazon and it'll be here in an hour. Right? Whereas before, like, back in good old times, I'd order something, it would take 2 weeks. And it's the same, kids think it's the same with skill acquisition, right? Well, if I can't do it immediately, and they'll look at other like world-class players and they'll be like, oh, well, they were just born with it. No, they weren't. Anything worth achieving is delayed gratification. And it's going to take 1,000 times of failure before you get that down and you get your mechanics right and you read the players correctly, so you know which players you can do this on, because this player overcommits and they leave that little bit of space, so you're confident doing it against them. So that's a long-winded answer to the question, but that's what we do. We kind of like we'll do the sessions, and a lot of the times our sessions we're doing the same thing, and we're seeing how they're developing, but I'll set that gauntlet to them, right? Try this week, and it doesn't matter if you fail, because at the end of the day, it's only football, right? No one's dying, no one's getting shot in the head.
So how about this? I'll use an old Sun Tzu quote here: "Art of War." A good leader, the people credit the success to the leader, and a great leader, the people say, "We did this ourselves." So, how do you create? Because especially if you're starting to work with a young youth player who doesn't know, you go back to your first story in 2003, kid has no idea what to do at home. And I think that's probably a more common scenario, right? Besides juggle, right? Or kick a ball against a wall, which is a remarkably powerful tool, by the way. I think kicking a ball against a wall might be the best thing you could do with the ball for a long time in your career. But how do you help a player, because I assume that this is part of the goal, go from being purely, the student who is saying, okay, yep, the coach is telling me this is something I should work on, this is how to do it, to ultimately the one charting their journey and starting to be self-reflective and saying, okay, I've identified this is an area I need to be better. And probably at that point going to you and saying, hey, can you give me some ideas of how to train this? To then also eventually them being able to, in real time, say, you know what, I'm understanding more and more how to train myself, and you are a reference as opposed to a crutch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my goal, right? My goal is to create, we have a hashtag own your development, right? And what you've just described is the essence of that. It will happen usually, I would say, between the ages of 16 and 19, 20, right? So usually when they're at a good level ECNL team, they start to understand the things that are missing from their game. And it's repeated actions, right? And what I try to do is create a safe space where they can have that vulnerability and be like, this is what I need to work on. And then we build out from there until eventually they're a college program. And again, it doesn't need to be a UNC, it can be a D3 or an NAIA school. As long as they know, like, listen, I have looked at the footage and it has confirmed what I think, that, when I use a half turn, I'm not checking properly, I keep going into people, or the turn isn't working, whatever it is, then we can guide them, right? And that guidance doesn't leave. Like, I always use, like, Alex is a good example, because Alex was always aware, but it got to the stage where Alex always knew what she wanted to work on, But it got to the stage where I'd be like, okay, I 100% agree with that, but what about this as well? And she wouldn't even question it. It would be, yeah, let's add that in, because she knew that I knew her game arguably better than she knew her game. Right? So it's the players who do it are the ones who take that extra time to study their game, because there's a formula, because what you think you need to work on, you've probably overblown in your mind. So get your huddle or VO, whatever it is, download it, look at your clips. Does it agree with what you think? So a lot of the time it won't. Okay, it does. Then I go to my trainer, send the trainer the clips. What do you think? Then you collaborate. Then you switch your coach in. Hey, I'm working on this. Watch me at practice. Tell me what you think. And it's a collaboration process. And obviously it works well on paper, but 10% of players will do it. And those 10% are usually the ones that are they're going to get invited to, you know, the ECNL top 11. Like, you know, it's those players, because you can tell it's your Ali Sentners, right? Your Cat Radars, your Shay Harveys, those players. Well, I've had Shay since she was 11. I think she's at Portland now. She went to quite a few youth teams, but she was always at ECNL. But when Shay was like 16, 17, that's when it started with Shay. Oh, Dave, like, she's a centre midfielder. When I take the ball, I'm like, I'm being too safe with it. The ball's too close to me. I need to work on that touch away from it. And, you know, I'd watch her footage and I'd agree. So that, for me, that's the best formula. But again, realistically, not all players are going to do it.
So it sounds to me like also a lot of what you're doing is psychology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And creating some confidence, or being another person there to say it's okay to do that.
Yes, it's soccer therapy, honestly. And for all levels. I would even go as far to say as it's more soccer therapy on the pro level. Because, you know, a lot of coaches don't know how to deliver their message properly. And what we as coaches and trainers have to understand is that humans have evolved in the last 20 years to be a lot more sensitive, right? Now, whether you agree with that or whether you don't agree with that, whether you think they're weaker than we were, whatever, I don't care. But players don't.
Well, all the feedback is just in your face, right?
Yeah,
that's why. Yeah.
Players don't like getting screamed at anymore, right? And players, what I found is like they know they can be vulnerable with me because I'll listen, and a lot of it for me is educating the player to understand that, okay, like this coach, this is how they deliver. They haven't evolved their delivery. They're not meaning to be mean to you. Right? They don't mean, they're not being personal. It's just their delivery. You have to understand their delivery, take out what you know that they mean, and ignore the rest. You know, if they use bad language, ignore it. So it's just their delivery, right? And then take what you want, tell me, then we build on it. And a lot of it is soccer therapy.
So you talk about working with girls versus boys. You know, are most of the players you work with are they female players? And yeah, regardless of that, how is there a difference when you are looking to plan sessions or interact with the boys and the girls?
Honestly, the only difference that I found is that with boys, you tend to have to prove yourself a little bit more. They're a little bit like, who are you? But again, I feel like now we've got the background where, you know, I used to train Landon. You know, Omar came out a bunch of times. Tyler Binden now got signed by Nottingham Forest. He's on loan at Sheffield United. You know, in December, went up to Nike, worked with Diego Luna. And, you know, and again, Christian, it's all about winning people over with evidence, right? So with Diego, first of all, great great guy, like really pleasant to work with. But I spent 8 hours on Y Scout looking at everything, getting all his stats, boom, 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 working it all out. And after our first session, he didn't say this to me, but he went up to, you know, all the Nike people, right?
Yeah.
Right? He went up to like Ben and was like, bro, this guy knows my game better than me. And that's my job, male and female, is to win players over with evidence so that then they know I'm serious. They know we're not just doing ball mastery to do ball mastery. We're not hitting long balls to hit long balls. You know, like we're doing this because this is why, X, Y, Z. This is where you keep missing, right? This is where your first touch needs to set, and it isn't. It's getting away from you. And I say that because there's 4 examples in these 3 games. And I think...
can I jump on that? Because you just brought an idea in my head, because I used to think about this in dealing with long balls. Because when you see a lot, let's put it in the bad training category, it's people hitting either stationary long balls or long balls with like the little prep touch with the outside of the foot, so the ball's slightly rolling. And if you then think about being a center midfielder, for example, and having to receive on the half turn, open your body, open your hips, and then whip your hips back across to hit a diagonal, it is almost a completely different set of, well, it is a completely different set of movements to set up for the striking of the ball is the same surface. Yeah. But if you don't train the actual movement of opening my hips, taking the touch away, and then whipping my hip backs across it, you're not going to see progress by hitting a stationary ball.
And with that...
Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. But even with that first movement, they've got to be receiving a ball that they actually receive in a game.
Right.
If they're often receiving balls at a shit height, at ankle height, then I need to play those balls in ankle height. So, you know,
it's the old, if your training doesn't look like your game, there's probably a problem with your training.
Yeah, and one of the players that I've worked with a lot on her long balls is Sarah Gordon. She's a centre back for LA. And with Sarah, it's having a receive and open with a heavier touch than normal because she's usually got that space around her. And then I'm obsessed with texture on the ball. And with Sarah, I'm like, right, you know, if you've got Giselle on the left and you know that Giselle's going to be making that run, I want you to texture that ball so it's got the right height, but it's slightly the outside of your foot. So as it bounces, it's the spin takes it further ahead. Because we know that Giselle's rapid, right? So we know that Giselle wants that ball in front of her. I don't want you to play it to Giselle's feet in the air because we're taking away what's most dangerous about her then. Like, can she deal with it? Yeah, she can deal with it. But let's put it in front of her. And basically, it's a good example because you see it all the time, right? They're just hitting the ball. They're just hitting long balls. They're hitting long balls. But you've got to take that picture from their footage, how they receive the ball. When they do spin out, is it the right angle? Right? Can you do a few angles? Because a smart forward will figure out that angle the second time you do it. Right? So a smart forward is going to be like, Jodie Taylor. Oh my gosh, I love Jodie. Jodie is the technical director at Arsenal Women now. But Jodie played for England. She played for Arsenal, Portland, Orlando. And I always used to say, I've worked with Jodie a lot, but I used to tell people like she's the smartest player I've ever worked with. And 2015 World Cup, I think it was the quarterfinals, England, Canada at BC Place. I went for dinner with Jodie the night before, and I'm like, "Oh, what's your plans?" And she's like, and I feel bad because I'm throwing someone under the bus, but she's like, I'm gonna sit off Lauren Sesselman. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, every time the ball comes near her, I'm going to sit off her because she's good for one big mistake every game. And I'm like, it's a bit risky. She's like, no, you watch. And it was like she was Nostradamus. Because in that game, the ball came in. Lauren had a touch. It wasn't a horrific touch, but it was just far enough. Jodie was there like a sniper. And she went in, she got the ball, she nutmegged Khadisha with a shot and scored. And that it blew my mind. Right,
Isn't Sesselman a Wisconsin kid, Christian?
Yeah.
Yep.
She is. She
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Sorry, Lauren.
No, but good player.
Yeah.
But I was always blown by Jodie's in-depth details. Right, like you knew she had studied like all the defenders. She had studied, and that's what she made her mind up on. Right, yeah, that's what I'm going to wait for.
Well, and that's the other thing embedded in what you're talking about is every single player has strengths and weaknesses, regardless of what level you're looking at. And the challenge of becoming great, and I think, Doug, you and I have talked about this in the past, great players, truly great players, aren't great at everything. They're really good at everything. There's 2 or 3 things that separate them as world class, right? And so, to me, part of the challenge of looking at a young player is trying to figure out, Doug, you call it super strengths, but like, what is the thing that we can make different for you than anybody that you're competing with? And to me, that's embedded in your planning.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that probably goes unseen, David, I'd be interested to know if you agree with me on this, is the more I think with what you're doing and what all I think good coaches try to do is because you're consistently asking the players to reflect, think about what they're good at, see what they're good at, understand what they're good at. I feel like that's opens players' minds to then do what Jody does and look at what another player might do that they can take advantage of. You know what I mean? But I think that's the other part of that. It is. I think we've talked about this before on this podcast. One of the hardest things to me in coaching is to get players to reflect on what they've done. And what it means and how they take that information and make themselves better or recognize those things. It's really hard to do because they want to move on, right, to the next thing.
Now, I think what's so powerful now in 2026 is Huddle, Y Scout, VO Trace. I think it's so powerful because, we want players to reflect, and we want them to reflect evidence-based facts, right? Because Rachel was, psycho in a good way. Rachel walk off a field after playing a game of her life and be like, I was shit today, wasn't I? And you're like, what part of you was, what particular part of you was shit today? The 3 goals you scored? And it's like, no, like in the 64th minute, I turned out and went straight into Pino. It was terrible. And then with footage, I was able to compile, like, right, there's all the things you did really well. There's that 1 or 2 moments that you're reflecting on. Tell me what outweighs what. And
there's your soccer therapy for you.
Yeah, and then she would then not necessarily understand, but she'd be like, yeah, right, that's fair. And I'm like, what you did with, that movement is we can fix it in a heartbeat. Or I'd give respect to the defender. I'm like, defender was brilliant, right? She's obviously studied your game. She knew that you were going to do that and shut you down, right? Like, respect where it's due.
Well, this has been I think a really good discussion. It's clear, and the reason that we wanted to bring you on this is the track record that you've had in terms of players that you've worked with and the growth of the company. It's hard to scale individual training, right?
It's hard to scale integrity. Yeah, that's what it's really hard to do. But I could do 10 sessions a day, but it's not possible because I can't keep track of players like that.
Yeah.
So I prefer a smaller circle with better results.
Would you say
he's selling Ferraris, not Toyotas? Is basically.
Oh, the Toyotas are pretty good.
Would you say?
I had to pick something.
I'm gonna ask a question. Would you say? I'm gonna put an avatar here of the average 15, 14-year-old youth soccer parent. Would you say it is better to have fewer sessions with the trainer, but a more in-depth plan that is more put on the kid to do on their own, but a planned activity tied to the kid and their strengths and weaknesses in film. So, you meet the trainer once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks for a session with, for lack of a better word, homework, or to have a trainer who is there 3 days a week.
Yeah.
But less specific and more generic.
This is my fear with the trainer revolution, and I fear that I started it, first of all. So, sorry. But what I fear is that we're just going to, because parents are being sold a lie, right? Like, if you train with this guy every day, what's going to happen? You're going to produce a techie robot with no football brain, right? So I usually work with players once every week or once every 2 weeks, right? Depending on their schedule. And I want those players to work on what we've worked on during the week. And then you'll see if your kid actually wants it.
Well, and by the way, I'm going to guess that the kid who doesn't do anything between the time that you work on them, they're not moving that far and they're not going to be around that long doing stuff.
The needle
which is a test for the parent and your kid.
Yes. Yeah. The needle doesn't move and the parents know. It's like, okay, they don't really want it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got your Olivia Moultries, right? Who you had to tell Liv, like, you need to take a day off, bro. Like, Liv was up at 5 a.m. working whilst her parents were asleep, right?
By the way, that's a whole nother topic, because I do think that's also, it's sort of the negative of the grind never stops, is there is such a thing as diminishing returns, and take some time off.
Christian, we used to have a t-shirt that said rise and grind and more grind, and it's one of the things I'm ashamed of, and I want to put one out that says rise and grind and nap, right? Because recovery is the most important thing in all of our training, team training, individual training, strength training. You need that day off mentally and physically. You have to. And it's, sometimes it's spring break and the parents are, we feel bad because we're going away. Should we take a ball? I'm like, no, don't take a ball. Take a week off, bro. Like, it's okay.
We had a phrase at a pool that was carpe mañana as opposed to carpe diem. It was, hey, maybe tomorrow you can seize the day. Today you're going to sit at the pool.
Today you're going to relax, because that is a training week. You chilling for a week is absolutely, that can count toward your streak. 100%. It's why we don't do streaks in my app, because it's important to take time off. Like, for me as well, and for you guys as well. Like, I'm sure sometimes you get footballed out, right? Because there's some times where I'm just like, I don't even want to watch it. I didn't watch the League Cup final because I had a gut feeling Arsenal were going to lose. This is why I didn't watch. But I didn't want to watch it because I'm like,
is that just because that what tends to happen every time it gets to this time of the year?
Yes. Wow. Yeah, that's what.
Hey, my kids are huge Arsenal fans, for the record, but I did have the same.
They're going to win the league. They're going to win the league.
Why would you let them do that?
Yeah, they're going to win the league. You'll be fine. They're going to win the league.
No, I think we're going to win the league, and I think we're going to win the Champions League as well.
Really?
That's a bold statement right there.
That's a bold statement. I don't think the Champions League's going to happen.
We will smash Real Madrid to smithereens.
There's a marker laid down right there.
That's just my gut feeling, because I feel like
I think we need to end on that. I mean, that is I don't think we can go any farther.
I'm not putting any money on it. Well, we close all these with the very aptly named Bracken Brainbuster, which is where Doug comes up with a wide range of questions. Some are good and some are not, yes. And then we all give an answer. Yeah,
you'll know if Christian doesn't like it because he does this face, and I'm like, oh, well, that's instant. That's my instant feedback.
Instant feedback that is timely and measurable. It's very important.
And all of our Jacob, Ryan, and Dean come back on here so that we can ask this question. Sometimes serious, sometimes not. Today's a little more serious, I guess.
Okay.
And this is because I thought about this with David coming on. it's always, this is an interesting to me, is what or who made you do what you're doing? Because obviously you've taken something and worked hard to perfect it, and you've created something. And Christian and I don't know everybody's origin story here, but Christian and I obviously were involved in starting ECNL.
Which,
So,
by the way, respect, because you guys have absolutely killed it, and it's the league that I recommend to everyone because you do things the right way.
Well, we appreciate that.
yeah, it wasn't just us, but we were there. We were
A
there.
lot of good people.
So what made you? What or who made you want to do what you do? And David, I'll give you the floor first.
I would say the tipping point for me was Ali Riley when she pulled me and said, "You need to grow up. You've got something here. You've got a special talent." And that was when I thought, if this kid's saying this, who's always mean to me, then it means something, right? And that's when I thought, yeah, this is going to work.
Awesome. All right, Lavers, you're next.
I get next. I guess the first time I became really reflective and aware of the impact of a coach, it wasn't a coach that ever coached me, but I did some trainings with him as a young player in college. This guy named Brett Hall from Chicago, an old NASL guy who worked with a lot of players, male and female, in Chicago, and I saw how much those players improved and how important he was to them in their growth and just as a mentor for a lot of them. And I said, you know what, that's an incredible power of a coach, and it made me more interested in becoming a coach watching that impact.
Yeah, cool. Let's go to Dean Linke. We know that Leah made you want to do what you do, but beyond that.
Leah gets worked into every answer, David,
Yes,
which
yes.
is Dean's wife. So
He always finds a way.
31 years, David, and counting.
Hey, respect. I respect that. It's brilliant.
I'll start with my grandma because she was a massive Detroit Tigers fan, and I would fall asleep every night listening to Ernie Harwell, who is one of the all-time great voices of broadcasting, and that's when I knew I wanted to be a broadcaster. The good kind of segue for me was deciding to do a PR degree and getting picked up by U.S. Soccer while I was still in college in 1989. And if you look at what happened in 89 through 96, and then being able to join the Colorado Rapids as their TV voice would be the tipping point. But I got to give credit to my grandma and Ernie Harwell, with a little tip of the hat to Chick Hearn, since I lived out in LA and went to a lot of LA Lakers games and got to listen to him because I think he's one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's go to Ryan.
I don't know if there's any person in particular, but just growing up and loving sports and just liking just such a wide range of sports and playing a lot of different sports growing up just always made me want to stay close to it. And I was always good at writing as well. So just kind of connected those two things together and kind of tried to make something out of it with that.
Yeah. All right, Jacob.
I got to give a lot of credit to my parents. They always said that I could be whatever I wanted to be when growing up. And in high school, when it became very apparent I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, I kind of turned to communications and specifically journalism, because I would read the Sunday and Saturday newspaper, the sports section, every day growing up with my cereal. So they're the first people. Then in college, Caitlin Moyer, who is the director of digital media for the Milwaukee Brewers, she gave me an internship with the Brewers my senior year, and she showed me that I wanted to work for teams and organizations, not for newspapers. And then I got to give credit to Andrea, because she hired me the first time here in the ECNL, and then when I went away, and then she brought me back for my second tour. So I'd say how I ended up here specifically at the ECNL is Andrea, Christian.
To be fair, we were very uncertain about bringing you back, having had a
Very
first
uncertain.
from Jacobs.
A lot of uncertainty.
Now,
The
I will
jury's
say,
still out. The jury's still out.
I will add, your story, David, about sort of, house sitting and using somebody's field. And I remember when I started looking into soccer, and I was graduating, and all my friends were going to Arthur Andersen or, IBM or some big company like that. And I was like, I think I might coach. If my parents hadn't said, you know what, if that's what you want to do, go do it, but keep moving forward, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do that, and would have been very similar to you in that sense of, there was a moment where you said, you know what, maybe I'll take this more seriously, and somebody helps support that or provoke it.
And look at what you guys have grown, right? Like it's crazy. It's so big. It's so big, and it is the top. It's probably the top youth league in the world, right? It's massive, and look at the players that league churns out, right? It's you guys. I don't think you guys realize the amount of impact that you've had on the landscape, because you live it day in, day out, right? But when I get a kid who plays ECNL, they wear that badge with the utmost pride, because that in their head, that means they've made it at a youth level. And I think you guys should be really, really proud of what you've done.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will say one of the core values is that the league doesn't develop players, clubs develop players, and we serve them and serve the coaches, and individual coaches are a part of that. And I think the best clubs have a way of solving the individual training dilemma.
Definitely.
Whether that's outsourced or working with people or in-house or whatever it may be, it's not ignored. It's addressed very intentionally. So really appreciate you being on here and sharing your story, and good to connect. And I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'll put my glasses back on now so you can make fun of me.
So you look smarter immediately.
Oh, that's what you look first time. That's why he took his glasses off. He's like, I
didn't answer the question yet.
I can't answer. I did not get to answer. Thank you for cutting that.
Right, we're going to go back to Doug.
Yeah. I honestly, I did not have any idea. I loved sports growing up. I loved playing sports, being involved in it. But when I went to college, I befriended a guy who had played basketball at Ashland University, where I went, and but he was an old timer. His name is Kevin Wilson. And so he and I just became friends and had a relationship, or kind of a mentor type relationship. He was the director of sales recruitment for the Hyatt Regency Corporation. So he asked me if I would be interested in becoming a sales manager for the Hyatt Regency Corporation. But I found and I said yes. That was my first job. I was a sales manager.
Calling.
I know, yeah, right. I was a sales manager at the Hyatt Regency. And so in New Orleans, Louisiana, very oppressively hot down there. Not great. But as I talked to him all the time, we talked a lot about coaching. And so after I'd been there for a year, I said, this really isn't for me. I really want to get into coaching. One of my college teammates, Mike Varga, who I have to give credit to, said, hey, I'm the head coach at Lincoln Memorial University in Harrogate, Tennessee. Come be my grad assistant. And so that's how I started it. I thought back then, if I could make, enough money to live, a meager existence and be able to coach and do something I enjoyed, I would have made it. So, fast forward to here, obviously we've had a lot of really cool opportunities, and things have aligned where we're able to do something that we really enjoy doing. And Christian and I sat next to each other at a meeting and didn't really know each other, and then we started working together, and it's been 17 years of that. Mostly
Who's
good.
Counting? Who's counting?
Mostly good. So it's been great. So, but we all have some driving force. So I thought that was an important question to ask. So that's cool.
Question.
Yeah. But David, yes, thank you, man. That was super interesting. I think it's really helpful, also information for people. I have a kid who plays, and yeah, so
I appreciate you guys' time. I appreciate the platform. and I appreciate what you all do. Do you know,
Likewise.
low key, I've always been a fan of Dean.
Oh, wow.
Now you've got a friend for life, man.
He's got such
Oh
a
my
good
gosh.
voice, right? His
Yes.
voice is made for commentary.
Voice of our generation.
Yeah.
Voice of our generation.
Thank you, David.
100%.
I was actually getting ready to give Christian the needle and say he doesn't know who Chick Hearn or Ernie Harwell is. You know at least one of those guys, Christian.
He does.
I'm right? Am I
Everybody
right?
knows Chick Hearn. Everybody knows Chick Hearn. Come on.
He has no idea.
He doesn't. He doesn't. All right. Well, this was great. Thanks to everybody. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and until then,
That's a wrap.
that's a wrap.
Today's episode is brought to you by Discount Tire. Want the same expert advice from the pros at Discount Tire Store while shopping online? Meet Treadwell, your personal tire guide. Whether you're driving to practice or game day, Treadwell gives you tire recommendations based on your vehicle, location, and driving habits. Get matched with the perfect tires so you can stay focused on the goals that matter most. Shop with Treadwell at discounttire.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Continental Tire. Score big with Continental Tire. Prioritize your safety on the road with our thoroughly tested tires for top-notch traction, handling, and durability. Drive with confidence. Find your dealer at continentaltire.com. Continental Tire, the smart choice in tires.